Hey, welcome everybody to our live at Hope for Our Times. And I have two guests with me today. We're going to have just a really terrific time. I promised you guys earlier, John Haller was going to be joining me live. Lots to talk about, news coming out of Israel. And David Towle is also joining us, so welcome both of them. And we are going to get going because we got questions. These guys have answers. I know even John wants to ask David some questions. So David, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, yeah, it's fun to be here, and there's a lot of things to talk about, including what happened a couple of days ago, and what's actually seems to be cooking up right now as we speak.
Yes, it is.
Let me shift into my trial lawyer cross-examination mode here.
Go for it, John. Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Hi, David.
Go ahead. I know you have a lot of questions.
Let's let David talk, because I want to hear what David has to summarize, because he's got a lot more skin in the game than I do.
Okay, where do we want to start? The fighting's getting fierce. At least what's coming out right now is that they're kind of pulling the news in Khan Yunis, which is where we think they might have kind of hold up Sinwar and kind of the final kind of aspects. In the meantime, Qatar is talking about some big, massive negotiation that's going on, and they're talking about figuring that one out. So those are the two things that I think are right now on the chapter.
Now, David, I read today that the government, I guess, and by that, I guess maybe the war cabinet, whoever's in charge, sometimes hard to figure out, had made an offer that for release of the hostages, there would be a ceasefire, but Hamas leaders would have to exit the strip and go into exile someplace. Does that seem like a credible thing that would have been offered?
Well, according to Israeli press, that has been offered, but the Qataris have said very clearly that the Hamas will never agree to this. So I think that's more or less what we're talking about here on our side, meaning the government has offered this. Again, this is very similar to what we did with the PA, with the PLO in Lebanon in 82, I think it was. So we're talking about something similar to that. And yes, there is, according to what we hear here, an offer like that on the table. But it looks like the Hamas isn't going to accept that. So what we're talking about right now is a more, multi-stage release of all of the non-military hostages in return for about 2 months of a ceasefire. And the question is, what's going to happen after that?
How many of the existing 132 hostages are military related?
We are talking about probably about half of them.
Okay.
But here's the question. One of the main questions is nobody really knows how many hostages there are. Meaning, last time I heard, we're talking about something like 28 or 29 that might have died in captivity or been killed in captivity and whatever. So, and there's still hostages that we think, and probably including the 1-year-old child that is still in captivity, that we think is probably not completely in Hamas hands. And we know that there were other factions inside Gaza, including some warlords who just crossed over the border and took a couple of the hostages and ran away with them.
Wow.
And you're talking warlords like from Egypt, from the Negev, from like an ISIS in the Negev?
I'm talking about Gaza, how would I say this? Gaza drug or Gaza crime families, basically.
So a crime family apart from the Hamas terrorist family.
We know that at least some of them did and sold the hostages to the Hamas. And then there's that terrible story about the head that was found in a refrigerator, where they were trying to sell that to whoever, to the highest bidder. But basically, yes, that's what we're talking about.
Wow.
So yesterday, I'm doing a panel with Jonathan Tobin from JNS tomorrow. And, we're going to talk about the U.S. elections and how that affects things. But as I was reading today, Jonathan Feldstein is the moderator of that panel, and we were texting back and forth about the incident that happened yesterday in Gaza. Why don't you tell everybody about that?
I'm trying to figure it. I think we were, day before yesterday. Not in Khan Yunis, not where the main fighting is taking place. They actually rigged a building to be exploded, actually two buildings to be exploded. And somewhere in the process, and we're not getting very clear information, but somewhere in the process, while it was being rigged, an anti-tank missile was fired at a tank and at the building. And that somehow sparked the explosives that were being prepared while the soldiers were still in the building. And the two buildings actually came down on them. We're talking about 22 men that were killed in that, most of them reservists. And that's the harsh thing about it.
Jonathan Felstein said that one of his daughter's very close friends, her brother was killed, and he, they're all young guys in their 20s or whatever, and he was married and his wife is pregnant. So it's a massive tragedy for that family, for all the families involved. And it's so, I mean, I don't think you're there right now, but how does this affect the sentiment of the people sort of as a whole, and then maybe in particular groups?
Israel is in the middle of a massive, I don't want to say conflict, but there's a discussion. And there's two main kind of illustrations that will illustrate the discussion. On one hand, the families and the people that are supportive of releasing the hostages immediately. And you've got family members and you've got certain elements of the government, even including Gadi Eisenkot, who was the former chief of staff, who are very outspoken on do everything that needs to be done, release the hostages ASAP. The other...
And Eisenkot, by the way, he lost a son in this, did he not?
Yeah. Eisenkot lost a son and one of his nephews, if I remember correctly, in this. On the other hand, you've got soldiers literally coming out of Gaza with signs on their Jeeps, which is very unacceptable in Israeli culture, that's saying, let us finish this off. Let us do this. And these two factions, or for lack of a better word, arguing between themselves, whether we first finish off Hamas and then deal with the hostages, or first deal with the hostages and then finish off Hamas. And it is a very profound and very deep conflict, because on one hand, we realize the need to finish off Hamas. Everybody in Israel realizes that. On the other hand, the families are saying, we don't care about anything. We don't need anything. We just need those to be released. And Israel is going through an argument. And I think the government is trying to kind of wobble through or wiggle through how this is going to work out. And we haven't even gone into the Israeli politics that are playing a role in here. But I think Bibi is trying to find a way to kind of find some kind of, maneuvering place, because, and this kind of ties into what we're talking about now, the upcoming elections and the sentiment in the world is putting much more pressure on Israel to reach a ceasefire.
Let me jump in here real quick. Regarding the government, and I have a couple of questions. One of them is regarding the current government. You have Netanyahu in there. What do you see happening? Because I don't think it's going to be favorable to Netanyahu. Regardless of what side everybody's on, all this happened on Netanyahu's watch. And there's other things that are developing. And the other question I have is regarding the West Bank. Are there concerns with problems in the West Bank with people being radicalized and what could develop out of there? So those two things.
Let's start off with the West Bank, because that's easier kind of maybe to define. The West Bank has been relatively quiet. I know it sounds weird to say it like that, but relatively the only issue that Israel has had to deal with is the Hamas elements in the West Bank, who are in opposition to the PA, to the Palestinian Authority. and Israel has been dealing with them in places like Tulkarem and Jenin. There have been actually a lot of Israeli security forces going in to deal with this, but we haven't had the all big uprising in the West Bank that a lot of us were thinking we were going to see, neither in the West Bank or even inside the Israeli Arabs that we saw in the last 2014 clash between Israel. So I'm saying the West Bank is being contained more or less. It hasn't risen up, though there's always a feeling underneath that tunnels in the West Bank, tunneling underneath Israeli communities in the West Bank, things like that. But it hasn't full-fledged blown up yet.
How about the situation, though, where the Arab workers that used to come in from the West Bank, thousands of them every day?
Well, probably tens of thousands, yes. And again, that is, again, Israel's economy has stopped, and the West Bank economy has stopped as a result of that. I mean, there are two economies that are totally correlated. So yes, and again, there's a talk about the money, the taxes that Israel owed Palestinians that get handed over to the Palestinian Authority, and that'll segue into the political system in Israel, because the more militant part of the Israeli government is saying, don't give them any taxes. Don't give them. I mean, this is money that was collected. It's basically theirs. The United States of America is putting huge amounts of pressure on the Netanyahu government to release those taxes. And again, the United States has its agenda inside what's going on here. Appeasement to the Arabs, a solution. We want to reach some kind of solution, even a two-state solution, a Palestinian state. There's still talking about that, and I think the Biden administration would feel very good if under their watch the two-state solution comes back and there's peace in the Middle East and love and for everyone.
So you're talking about, though, the Palestinian taxes that are collected by Israel. Israel hasn't paid them over with. And when you say militant, I assume you mean the religious parties that form a fairly powerful part, outsized powerful part of Netanyahu's coalition. Like, was it Smotrich as one of the finance guy?
Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, okay, who are the political. In a nutshell, for people who don't understand, Israel has different, for lack of a better word, flavors of the religious parties who are part of the coalition. We're a coalition system, meaning the Likud party run by Benjamin Netanyahu has to make concessions to other parties in order to create a majority to be in power. He has made coalitions with the religious parties. There's the Orthodox religious, who are mainly about the economic dynamics of it. And there's the more nationalistic, militant religious, who are the people who live in the settlements and are very pro-Israel in the West Bank and in the Strip. Because of the tit for tat that's been going on for the last couple of years in our elections, the religious parties did step up in the amount, and they're the ones who created the coalition, both the Orthodox and the National. They're the ones who created the coalition that is holding Benjamin Netanyahu in power right now. Saying that, recent polls show that if tomorrow there's an election, Netanyahu is not going to take the majority. The Likud party that Netanyahu is the head of will not take the majority. And probably Benny Gantz will come out with more seats in the parliament. And together with the center right and the center left, meaning, let's say, people like Lieberman and Yair Lapid, would probably create a coalition today that would oust Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party in the situation today.
Would Gantz be able to form a government of elections today without bringing in the Arab group that was brought in by Lapid and Bennett in the
Definitely yes. Definitely yes. And the way the blocks are actually set up, it looks like today Gantz would be able to pull off a coalition with one or two of the religious parties, depending on who. And probably Both of them. So yes, Gantz would probably be in power today if the government falls apart. And there is a lot of resentment to Benjamin Netanyahu. There is a lot of
Sure.
resentment for.
You should see my email. I'm sure your email's similar. About and it was interesting just for when I did my update on Sunday. I track a lot of different papers, and it seems like there's almost this. I think this is where Tom wants to go with this next, but there's like this coordination. So what was coming out? It was the New Yorker magazine. It was the New York Times. It was the Washington Post. It was some of the Israeli press as well. They're all saying, "Oh, Netanyahu's the problem. If we can he's so ambitious. If we just get rid of him, everything's going to start to come together, and we'll have a ceasefire, hostages home, and peace, and all this other stuff." And so that was coordinated last week. Now today, over the last 24 hours, there's been like the Jerusalem Post has a big article right now about. We're going to have to, one guy writing Jerusalem Post saying, we got to force Israel into this situation. And this is the only way to go. We've got to make them see that this is the only possible way that we're going to get this done. And then the EU has put out a 10-point plan through their foreign ministry that says this Israel, time for talk is over, time for fighting is over. And now it's the time for peace. And so how do you think that's going to go?
Well, there's two elements that really are reverberating in my mind. First thing is I saw Memory. I don't know if you know what Memory is. It's the website with an interview with Khalid Mashal. Khalid Mashal was the head of the Hamas, the guy sitting and making billions in Qatar right now, but saying very, very clear, okay? Don't bring the two-state solution, old-fashioned idea out. We don't want a two-state solution. We will not accept a two-state solution no matter what. We believe that we have the upper hand right now. And he actually is quoting American students chanting from the river to the sea. And he's saying, look, if in America we've got this kind of support, in the rest of the world we've got this side of support, there's no reason for us to accept a two-state solution right now. So that's one element. And again, I think it's wonderful that the world is saying two-state solution and let's reach peace and everything. I don't think the other side's ready for peace. The other side's ready for the destruction of the state of Israel, and they can smell the blood in the water right now. I don't see how that's going to happen. Another thing is, yes, Israel was smacked in the gut. I mean, we're still bruised. We're still bruised by the Hamas. So I don't think it has anything to do with Netanyahu, the fact that most of the people in Israel want to see the Hamas gone and want to see a situation where the Hamas will not be a threat like this. Again, I doubt if any government can come to power who is not stressing that thing in the psychic inside Israel right now.
Let me ask you on that, do you think that Hamas will be eliminated? Do you ever think they would? I mean, from what I read, Hamas is in trouble with the IDF. However, there's still a lot of other things that are happening. I mean, Hezbollah is still a threat. You have different situations. Will Israel be able to put an end to Hamas? Will Hamas ever surrender? And where do you see that going?
There's two. The question right now is, will Israel push Hamas all the way to the end where they surrender? Or will this stop at some point along the way where Hamas can actually wave a flag from somewhere and say, we succeeded? If that happens, then this is not going to end. We're going to see it again and again. And here's the thing. I'm going to say if Hamas isn't completely defeated, then I think I've said this in a couple of places. Everybody with an AK-47, a drone, and a missile is going to hold up the world hostage for the near future. So that's part of the thing. And what I'm trying to say is, I think even the United States is starting to understand at least part of this. So that's one end of it. If they do come out with the flag standing, then the ideal of the Hamas isn't going to be over. Do you know if there were elections in the Arab world today, you know who would win right now?
Hamas.
The Houthi. I mean, given an all-out Arab world, who's the great? How to say? The Houthis is because they're standing up, not because they're surviving, not because they're beating America, but they're willing to stand up. Hamas would win an election in the West Bank at any point right now. Okay, so that's the situation that is there, and I don't see a good ending. Think about America reaching an appeasement with Nazi Germany before Berlin was conquered. I mean, after D-Day, if Nazi Germany had come to the Americans and said, let's give up, okay, what would that have meant? What would Europe have looked like at the end of that? Think about the Cold War or the war of attrition that would have endured after that for tens of years. Even after the Battle of the Bulge, I mean, think about that. I mean, if Germany had said, let's reach an agreement, and the Americans, no, the Americans had to go all the way to the end, conquer Berlin, find, Hitler dead in his bunker. And only after that were the Germans willing to say, okay, we want a different direction and de-radicalize themselves. By the way, same thing happened in Japan. So if we don't finish off Hamas, we will have lost. And I think that's very clear. And the question is, will the world let us do that? And that's a question that I think, and again, speaking to you, Tom, and that I think it's as much a spiritual question as it is an actual political one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think John and I have just an interesting conversation because of the news over the last 24 hours with the pressure on coming from the world leaders. This particular article is from Times of Israel. It says EU's top diplomat, Palestinian state may need to be imposed on Israel from the outside. It is the EU's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, basically said Israel can't achieve this. They're unwilling. So it's going to have to be forced upon Israel to enter into an agreement that the world leaders put together. And then this other article, which is, I think, it was what John was referring to, out of the Jerusalem Post. The writer of the article makes 7 points on why Israel needs to engage with U.S. proposal of a PA-run Gaza to gain Saudi relations. And he goes on through this, and you look at it, ultimately we know there's going to be a peace plan that's going to come. We know it's coming eventually with Ezekiel 38, Daniel chapter 9, and so forth. But Israel is in such a bad position, and I know I had this conversation with John before, and I think you and I even talked about it, David, on New Year's Eve, that when Israel comes to the other side of this, the pressure is going to increase substantially against Israel, and that's what we are watching right now. And even when we look at passages in the Bible like Zechariah chapter 12, where the world will be gathered against Israel, those things aren't fulfilled yet, but everything is going that way. The anti-Semitism, anti-Israel rhetoric, it is increasing at an alarming rate. And I would think, especially being an Israeli and a Jew, it's got to be like, it's like the whole world is against us.
Oh, the whole world is against us. Again, here's another question that maybe we need to tie in. How are your elections going to impact this?
That's a great question. What do you think, John?
Well, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. And the question is, I don't know, because Tom, we talked earlier today on the Q&A thing that we did, and I told you that there are people that I would say people would put them into MAGA world, like a Judge Napolitano and that type of thing. And I just saw a video that he did, it was a couple of weeks ago, with Mersheimer, the historian, analyst, Middle East guy from the University of Chicago. And I mean, I'm telling you what, it made me so mad. I could, it took me, it's a good thing it was like hours till bedtime, because I wouldn't have got to sleep. Because, I mean, Mersheimer and Napolitano are going on, oh, like this is all Israel's fault. It's all Israel's fault. It's all the Houthis' fault. And they're dragging in. So on the MAGA side, in the world of conservative pro-Trump people, there are a couple divisions that I see, and there's everybody says America first. But when you really analyze what they're saying, like a Napolitano, even a Tucker Carlson, a Candace Owens, and that type of thing, they're really America only. So they don't think we should be involved in anything, but they don't understand that we got the reserve currency of the world because we do protect the sea lanes and shipping.
Yeah.
That's sort of the price of that benefit that we get. And they just want to throw that, they want to flush that down the toilet like that's not going to have an impact all over the world. But go ahead, David.
What I'm trying to figure out is, will the conservative aspect of American politics people and then politics, will they turn on Israel?
Look, I already see it. Like, so on October 7th, I saw, or October 8th, that day or the next day, I heard people talking about, it's here we go with the neocons and the Zionists dragging everybody into war again. And so now some of those people have backed off of that and they understand the implications of this. But I'm just telling you, on the Trump side, what I would call MAGA, there are a lot of people that are totally against that, and the anti-Semitism coming out of those people's mouths and minds is off the charts.
Yeah, I would just, I guess, John, in your terms, I would second that, because I am watching.
Sustained.
I would second that's a board meeting. So when I look at what's taking place on the conservative side, it's disturbing, because it's been happening in churches. We see replacement theology in the conservative churches already, but to watch it happen from the conservative political side, I'm seeing people that I used to watch all the time online, and I'm hearing the anti-Israel, anti-Jew talk even coming out. And they're all saying the same thing. Well, we're not anti-Semitic. And then it goes into the Zionists. Well, we're just anti-Zionists. And really, at the foundation, they don't understand the Bible. But what's troubling is many of these people. John, what was the quote you had from Judge Napolitano earlier in the program we did earlier today? Do you remember that quote?
I don't remember, but again, it's just sort of like they're all, it's just Israel's causing all the problems. And this is the kind of conversation that I get from people who don't follow the Bible. It's right. Something like this that from other people I know in America. It's a war over there. It's a problem area. It's always been a problem area. We shouldn't be bothered with this. It almost reminds me of the thought of the Roman Empire. If you go back a couple thousand years, we're having trouble with this outpost place in Jerusalem. We're so tired of having trouble with them. And this is what I'm hearing from people just in general out of the conservative side. It's just a small little place. Way over there, we're done with dealing with them.
The 0.02% of the world population is, in many been and has been down through history, is the main problem in everything. I mean, go to any Western civilization ever since the Roman period. It's always been because of the Jews. And again, I can go back to the Spanish Empire, who blamed the Jews for everything that went wrong when they started going down and banished the Jews. And I could go to a European anti-Semitism that says the Jews are the reason for everything going wrong and the reason everything is falling apart. And I could go to the Soviet Union that kind of, how do you say, erased Tolstoy out of the equation the minute that became relative. So again, we're not surprised that instead of saying we blame the Jews for everything bad that's going on in the world, we blame Israel for everything bad that's going to go on in the world. And both sides in this election are going to blame Israel for what's happening. I mean, if the Democrats lose, they're going to blame Israel. If the Republicans lose, they're going to blame Israel. And again, we're again seeing ourselves becoming the scapegoat of the world. And watching what's happening in American politics, like you said, is I'm not going to say fascinating. I mean, I study history. I mean, I love this, but the dynamic, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. We see it coming.
Yes. So what Biden, well, as I call it, the Biden administration is doing is Biden is playing to his left-wing, anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas base by trying to force this two-state solution. And it's not a two-state solution. It's an additional state or two for the Palestinian Arabs. They already have Jordan. And they want to add, they want more. They want Gaza and the West Bank, and it's insane. And nobody thinks it's going to work except all the elites in the world who think they control everything. They're going to shove it. So let me ask you this, David, because I think this is sort of the next step. So Israel is just in Gaza right now, and they're managing the north, and they're managing the West Bank. They're managing Lebanon-Syria border. But and so now in Gaza, like the New York Times reported that now it's like 500 miles of tunnels, not 180 miles of tunnels. It's totally off the charts. It's insane. But then Amir Avivi and other people that I know, they're saying, look, when you're it's worse. The Hezbollah problem in southern Lebanon is worse. And with the tunnels and the number of rockets and the number of launchers and everything. So let's say it seems to be inevitable that Israel has to deal militarily with that issue. But what is that going to do to world sentiment when they turn parts of southern Lebanon? The only way they can do it, I think, is turn Lebanon all the way to Beirut into what Gaza looks like now. And how is this managed in Israel relative to the world?
We are, in a nutshell, I think most Israelis are feeling we're reacting. We're not proacting right now. I mean, we're the way I kind of tend to put it is we're still bleeding. Literally, we're still bleeding. Sure. And then around the corner, we see somebody with the big sword that says, "I'm coming after you." And so Israel right now is dealing with the Hamas as best we can with everything that we can. And let's make this clear. This is not a political issue. Israel, the people, the population, everybody from the neighborhoods in Modi'in to the outskirts of Jerusalem to the progressive Israelis, all of them are saying we need to finish. We can't live with this kind of threat on the other side of our border. So that's not a political issue, which is why I think the politics are going to come to play when a government is going to have to play the political dance in order to stay in power. And again, this is how this is kind of tying in with American politics. What I'm worried about, and we might have this discussion, a year from now, is that Trump, in order to win, has to turn down his pro-Israel rhetoric in order to keep these conservatives that you're talking about in his camp. Otherwise, they're going to go and support the other camp just because, they're not under Israel's sway. And I'm seeing that as the upcoming threat.
Well, I think, David, you're exactly right. It's going to be incredibly divisive in the conservative movement going forward up through the election, at least, if not further. And Tom, I've said this to you on your program before. This is going to be one of the most, if not the most divisive issue within the evangelical church in our lifetime.
Yep. And it is ever increasing. You look back at the last 4 years, we can see the evangelical church becoming divided over the other issue. But on October 7, John, I think you and I both had this exact conversation that we can expect the church to be that much more divided over their stand on Israel. And we are also finding out that the side that stands with Israel is much more of a minority than many of us had expected before. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and we are definitely seeing it play out, not just with the conservative people that are on the internet, alternative media. We are now seeing it play out even more so with pastors. But I'm thankful, David. You know, I was just there a couple of weeks ago in Israel with the team with Marcus, and those are pastors that support Israel, that get it, and it's great. But we are finding out we are definitely more and more of a minority, and I'm thankful for knowing guys like John and other guys that are here in the West that are saying, no, we're towing the line. We get what the Bible does have to say, and we understand the current situation over there. But we also know the direction all of this is going. Again, Israel is going to be forced into some kind of peace agreement. And I think the pressure against Israel is only going to increase, as obviously you both made outstanding just statements regarding what to expect. And David, the way you put it together with whichever side wins and the other side losing is going to say it's Israel's fault. I totally see that coming. We're almost out of time. We got about 2 minutes left. David, what would be a final thing you'd want to share with everybody?
Okay, I'm like we've said before, I walk a very different or very interesting line where I'm also a born-again Christian, but also an Israeli. And I can tell you that the Israelis are looking at this, and there are echoes of all the bad things that we have been telling ourselves about anti-Semitism down through the ages. And I'm seeing it. It was fluid. It was history lessons. It was Fiddler on the Roof. It was, you know, the Spanish Inquisition. And here we are. We're back, and I'm watching it solidify in front of my eyes. I'm watching everything that I've heard about. And one of the things that I keep on saying to people is that I grew up as an Israeli. Yeah, we're Jewish. But I grew up as an Israeli, a proud Israeli, a strong Israeli, a tank commander, a major in the army. And all of a sudden, I'm reminded that I'm a Jew. All of a sudden, all of Israel is reminded that we are Jewish. The Israeli identity and all that it encompasses, we're back at everything, and we are going to watch ourselves get blamed. I feel like you know, like Tuvia leaving the shtetl, the little village that he has, because he has to move because his neighbors have risen up against us. This is going to happen. But I will say this, I've got a Christian side. And I know that God favors those who support Israel. And I want to scream to the churches. I want to scream to my Christian friends. I want to scream to everybody who takes the Bible seriously. Now's the time to prove what you've been teaching all these years. Now's the time to stand up and act the way you've been teaching from the pulpit and the way you've been going to Bible school and into Sunday school all these years. Now's the time. Please look at what's going on and stand up and make a difference.
Amen. Thank you, David. I'm going to get with you in just 1 second, John. I want to ask you your final thoughts on this. And just, this is a great reminder, everyone. We have the conference coming up in Australia, the live stream. It's 2 days. Listen, all of the proceeds, we aren't getting any profit from the conference. All of the proceeds are going to support Gihon Springs, which also supports Nativa, which is David's brother, Joel Goldberg's ministry, the outreach of Messianic Jews. Listen, this is about the gospel of hope that we have in Jesus and the support of the nation of Israel. And check it out. Go to the website, hopeforourtimes.com. You can check it out on live stream where the money is going to go to support the Gihon Springs and Nativa. It's all right there. You're going to be super blessed. You get great messages plus supporting Israel at the same time. And John, your final thoughts for everybody?
You know, I was thinking about this today. You know, we have these debates and arguments and discussions about finer points of eschatology. And I don't want to minimize those, but I think we're at this point where this is the rubber meeting the road in what we really believe about Israel. And so just talking to people like Olivier Melnick and you guys with Gihon Springs and everything, you know, on all sides of the issue of rapture debates and all this other stuff, one of the things is we want people to stand with help Israel. This is Matthew 25 stuff that we're having to live out now. And it's having a positive impact for the gospel. And so I think that's kind of where we need to focus. But it's difficult. I have Israeli friends; they write to me all the time, and they're shell shocked. I mean, yesterday, finding out that 21 young men had died in one incident in Gaza, all reservists. These are young guys that, a few months ago they were working at a desk job someplace, and now the impact on the families is just really hard to measure. And talking to friends that live in Efrat and stuff, they're going to one or two funerals a day, it seems. And it has a huge psychological impact. So I think we need to stand by and pray for Israel.
Thank you for joining us, both of you guys. David, you want to say one final thing, it looked like?
Well, like everything, you've probably heard me say this before. It's time to show God's people what Christian love actually is. And I think this is the time this is where you can do it.
Thank you so much. That was excellent with both of you today. And again, with Australia, with the live stream, the proceeds are all going to Gihon Springs. Support that, and the 4 branches that are with them, the Tiva being one of them, is even helping with some of the support with the IDF soldiers and so forth, and mostly the gospel of the hope of Jesus Christ getting there into the nation of Israel. David, people can find you at Balagan Connection. I know we have that included in the description. Everybody, I encourage you to go over there, like and share and subscribe to David's channel. It helps to get the truth out there. And really, the only way we can really get these messages out there is if you guys share it. And that's why we do this. So please appreciate it if you do that with this channel. Also like, subscribe, and share. And click on the notification so you know when we have another one coming up. And John at Fellowship Bible on YouTube. John, people can reach you there too, correct?
That's right.
Like, subscribe, share. Both John and David have things all the time. Outstanding, everybody. Make sure you go there. You're going to be super blessed. You're going to learn a lot from both of them. I know most of y'all already do, but make sure you do if you don't. And listen, we'll see you tomorrow. Bill Koenig's going to be joining me on the app exclusive. It's not going to be anywhere but the app and the website. It'll be Bill Koenig and all the things he's going to connect for us. And God bless you guys. See you later.